Hey, everybody. Great to have you with us. Today, we have with us Bob Unger. He is an attorney and a provocateur and a lot of other amazing things. Has been a radio host for a long time, knows everybody that there is to know. It's like absolutely crazy. I remember some years ago, I was going to go over to Israel and found out that Bob found out, and he's like, hey, I'm going to make you some meetings. So he sets up appointments with like the deputy speaker of the Knesset. He's like, you have to go interview him. So we interviewed him for the New American. So Bob is just a great guy to know, very opinionated and very well read and very smart. So it's an honor to have him on the program. Bob, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
So Bob, you are up in the thick of it. You're in New York. Now, tell us a little bit about what's going on. There's a few things I want to talk about with New York, but let's just start with the obvious that's on everybody's mind, this corona craziness, and then we'll get into Emperor Cuomo saying that Bill Gates gets to reimagine your education system. But what's going on with the corona stuff? I understand you guys have it worse than pretty much anybody. What's it like to be in New York? What are you seeing? Can we believe the media? What's happening?
Well, what's amazing is that the people are literally trained seals at SeaWorld. When you
Ah,
when you walk by them in the street, as I do all the time, not wearing a mask, all you can do is visualize them going like with their flippers, because they're literally scared to death, which of course is not good for their immune system. You want to get somebody sick, disturb them and get them frightened. And any doctor who knows anything will tell you that a very large percentage of sickness is psychosomatic or psychological in nature. And the fear on these people's eyes is just beyond belief. And the government is running commercials now that if you turn in your neighbor for idling his car, you get a percentage of the commissions. And people are literally calling the police. One of my clients has a friend who's a diner owner, and he walked into the street in Queens, New York. He's right off the Long Island Expressway by Junction Boulevard, and people started calling the police, and they came into the diner following him and looking for him. And he ran into the kitchen and put on a mask and came out, acting as if, he's not the guy, it's another guy. They are absolutely brainwashed. I mean, the only thing I did, because I know it helps my health in general, is I took an amazing amount of supplements recommended by Dr. Anthony Mercola, who is an unconventional MD, because I knew the supplements, even if coronavirus was not a threat, I knew they'd help me anyway. And they're also good for preventing cancer and many other diseases that are immune system related.
But we're
But
gonna have to
I,
block all this out, Bob, because YouTube has announced, I don't know if you saw, they're gonna take away any content on YouTube that goes against World Health Organization guidelines, such as recommending that people take vitamin C, and yeah, it's absolute craziness. Um,
yeah,
so
yeah, I mean, I think a doctor was arrested for giving vitamin C therapy. I forgot what state it was.
yeah,
But now you
I'm
have,
hearing the same thing from doctors. The government doesn't want to let them use hydroxychloroquine. You got governors around the country telling them you can do this, you can't do that, and of course the World Health Organization is totally insane. So on the legal front, Bob, you're a lawyer, you know something about the law. Does all this make sense? The government telling us you must stay home, you can't idle your car, you got to report your neighbors, you got to take this, you can't take that. Is this legal from a constitutional perspective? Is it legal from a statutory perspective? And what's the situation in New York with the law on this?
well, George Bush would tell you, don't you throw that damn piece of paper in my face. So
Right.
that's what he said. And that's
Hmm.
the attitude of people today. People today wouldn't know the Constitution if I smacked them in the face with it. Their kids don't know the Constitution, their parents don't know the Constitution, and their grandparents don't know the Constitution. But unknown to most Americans, who are the seals at SeaWorld, unfortunately, there is no such thing as a law unless it is passed by a legislature, either the Congress in the federal government, or at the state level, you have the Assembly in New York and the Senate. They can pass laws. There is no Supreme Court or any other type of court that can make a law, even though, as a lawyer, we're all taught now the nonsense that a Supreme Court decision is law, the law of the land. It is not the law of the land. And also, no idiot at the head of government, whether it's Trump, who wouldn't know the Constitution either, or whether it's Cuomo or any other governor, who cares what they say? Their words have absolutely no probative effect. But of course, nobody knows that.
So, yeah, I mean, you would think that you wouldn't have to be a lawyer to know something like that. I mean, I didn't go to school in America, but I would think that that'd be something you would teach people in like first grade civics, maybe second or third grade. How does a bill become law? I've seen the cute little videos. Um, so, what do we do about all this, Bob? I mean, you're right. We have clearly an unprecedented, I think, level of ignorance in this country about our form of government, where laws come from, what the Constitution says. What are some of the risks of this? And I think you guys are seeing some of that in New York right now. And what do we do about it? How do we get people to understand our Constitution and our legal framework and our individual God-given rights? I mean, how do we get people to re-understand these things?
Well, first of all, you just said God, and that is not even allowed. I just had a good friend of mine tell me that she said, God bless you, to her grandchild who sneezed. And her daughter-in-law turned around and said, you're not allowed to use that word in my house.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm not kidding. I'm not making this stuff up.
Wow.
So, look, I mentioned before about, turning in your fellow citizens. Well, think about this. The Germans were prosecuted at Nuremberg for following the law, the so-called law, which came out of the mouth of the Führer. And at least the Germans that turned in the Jews, they had something to lose. Because if the government found out that they knew Jews were hiding and didn't notify the authorities, they would have been killed. But the people that are calling the police on a diner owner, they're under no mortal threat that they have to risk their life if they don't report and rat out the owner. But people are being trained to be rats. And ironically, I don't know if you heard this on the news, there is now a rat epidemic in New York City. Literally, the four-legged ones.
Not the politician kind. Okay.
Yeah. So now we have the two-legged and we have the four-legged. And of course, the two-legged have less brains than the four-legged. So,
Wow.
situation now, look, it comes down, people are going to be turned off by this because I'm going to mention God. Whoa, what a sin. The fact of the matter is, if you don't believe in God and you don't have that parameter of objective right and wrong, then you have no character. And if you have no character, you don't care about truth. And if you don't care about truth, you are uneducable. The majority of Americans have been turned into uneducable, but very easily trained seals, as I said before. And because of that, they don't want to know the truth, as in the famous movie A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. Well, the fact is that they not only can't handle the truth, they don't want to know the truth because it's easier to just bury your head in the sand. They say ignorance is bliss. I say yes. Ignorance is bliss, just like the turkey before Thanksgiving, who's being fattened up on the farm, and then he sees the farmer coming with something behind his back, and it's an axe. And then all of a sudden, the bliss is not so great.
That's a good way to put it, Bob. And speaking of all these things, it made me think of something. I've been following in New York. It looks like your dear mayor there, Bolshevik DeBlasio, and the governor, Emperor Cuomo. They seem to have it out for Jews right now. Some months ago, I read that they were coming after the yeshivas because they weren't teaching enough government propaganda in the schools. They wanted to shut them all down. Then I heard DeBlasio saying, I guess he broke up a Jewish funeral, and he was saying that if churches or synagogues come together, he's going to shut them down forever. What's going on? Is the hatred of God that bad that they're coming after religious people? I mean, have you seen any of this, and what's going on?
Most of the rabbis are going along with this. People don't even know what the word inalienable means. It means that you can't sell it, you can't rent it, you can't purchase it. It inheres in you. And therefore, no government can stop anyone from going to church or going to synagogue or whatever. But unfortunately, the rabbis have bought into this garbage. Now, if a rabbi voluntarily decides that he doesn't want to take any risks, that's his business. I can't tell him or his congregation what to do. But the idea of law, what has happened is the government has replaced God with these people. And it's happening in the churches, not just the Jews. In fact, a so-called religious Jew called up DeBlasio during his press conference a few weeks ago and said, Mr. Mayor, why aren't you going after these Jews? This is a Jewish guy who ostensibly is claiming that he's a religious Jew from Crown Heights, Brooklyn, which is known for being religious. And, Borough Park you have in Williamsburg, there's a lot of Hasidic Jews there. And he says to I was going to say Cuomo, but what's the difference? He said to DeBlasio, he said, why aren't you doing anything? So DeBlasio says, tell me the address. And, under Jewish law, if a Jew rats out another Jew, the penalty actually technically is death. Now, I would never advocate that because I'm a very law-abiding citizen, Bible law. But de Blasio takes a pad. He says, what's the address? And it was someplace, I think, on 23rd Street in Brooklyn. He writes it down on a pad, and he calls the cops over, and he says, send 4 squad cars out there. So here you have a Jew ratting out his fellow Jews who are just trying to have a minyan, which is the required quorum you need in a synagogue to have a more powerful prayer. And they're ratting out each other. I mean, this is like the capos in Nazi Germany. But at least, as I said before, they risked death. But, there are always people of character, thank God. There was a rabbi in the concentration camp. This is little known by people. Then again, almost everything is little known by people. But he was told by the Nazis that they could get his kid off the death line if he got word out to his relatives to get gelt, money, and pay them off. They would take another Jewish child and substitute that Jewish child for the rabbi's Jewish child. The rabbi said, kill my child. That's character.
Wow. Yeah, what a story. I want to talk to you a little bit about Israel and what's going on there. But before that, one more thing about New York. It just came out in the news that Cuomo has partnered with Bill Gates. And, we have just launched a big video on Bill Gates. We're going to have an investigative report going into the print magazine here very soon on Bill Gates. And this is the guy who brought us Common Core, and who admitted it was a big experiment and we were going to have to wait for 10 years to figure out whether it was going to work. And now, oops, it didn't work. All the kids are dumb as a box of rocks. This is also the guy who is obsessed with reducing the population. I guess he doesn't take God seriously when he says that we should be fruitful and multiply. He says, no, the opposite. We're going to use vaccines and abortion to bring down the population. And now he is going to come into New York and reimagine, is the term they used, the education system. So tell us a little bit about what's going on with that. What does the education system look like now? Is it possible for him to make it any worse? And what all is happening up there with Gates and Cuomo and the schools?
Well, the one thing he'll have to overcome is he won't be able to put the instructions in English because they won't be able to read it. But putting that aside, right around the early 90s, there was a woman named Anita Hogue in Pennsylvania. Her son came home from taking a standardized test, which parents think is supposed to measure your academic status and how you're doing. Well, he came back very disturbed because the test contained psychological questions, and it asked him, under what circumstances would you throw rocks through somebody's window if your friends were doing it also? And it left no multiple choice answer that could say, I don't want to throw rocks from somebody's window. What they were looking for is the locus of control, which is a psychological term, which means at what point will the child break? Because every human being under torture under brainwashing has a breaking point. How can we get this child to throw out all of the things he was taught by his parents about traditional morality and about American nationalism and things like that, and the Constitution? How can we get him to throw it out? At that time, they had trouble because they couldn't keep tabs of the kids the way they wanted to, because we didn't have the type of technology that you would need to have an individualized program for every child tracking his attitudes and his feelings and his viewpoints. Well, in comes Bill Gates. And it's no coincidence that Bill Gates is going to, quote unquote, reimagine education. And I'll bet dollars to donuts that he is going to implement the software where you'll put a kid in front of a computer screen and they'll already know what he's lacking. Does he believe in God? Oh, we got to get rid of that. Does he believe in the Constitution? Oh, his parents homeschooled him. We've got to get rid of that. And at that point, they will drill him and they will turn him into the trained SEALs I spoke about.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Bob. And I've been very troubled with what's coming down the pike here. You know, they've taken advantage of this coronavirus. They moved all the learning onto computers, and now they're saying, hey, you know, we'll just make the teachers they could be facilitators and they could supervise a classroom full of kids playing on their screens. And, you know, it is quite literally behavioral animal style training. You get a reward when you push the right button and you display the right attitude to the appropriate stimulus, and you get a little sad face when you don't have the right attitude. That's where this is going, and it looks like New York might be pioneering it. New York also pioneered something else, the birthday abortion. What's the story on that? You know, I saw the Cuomo had these big festivities when he signed into law this thing that you could basically slaughter the child on his way out the womb. Um, you know, are New Yorkers okay with this? Are you guys so detached, and not you in particular, Bob, but the state of New York? Are you guys so detached from you know, mainstream America that this is acceptable?
Well, this is true across the board. I mean, people have no frame of reference. I saw a police officer kick in the head a black man simply because he objected to the police trying to enforce social distancing on the street. And this cop attacked him over a social distancing. He was no threat to anybody. And when I brought this up online, all the so-called conservatives, you know, who don't even know what the word means, said, oh, well, you know, the cops are just following orders. Why are you, they asked me, why are you attacking the police? Well, I attack any police officer who would do that. But they believe they are no different than the Nazis today in 2020. It's okay if you're following orders. And this happened in Israel. As you know, you interviewed Moshe Feiglin. And Moshe Feiglin's son refused to follow orders because his commander wanted to save the lives of the Arabs that were sending incendiary bombs into the Jews and sniping at them with automatic weapons. And he told Moshe Feiglin's son to stand out in the field so he could make himself a sitting duck so they would know where the exact shooting is coming from so that they wouldn't accidentally kill one of the colleagues of the terrorists. And Moshe Feiglin's son said, no, I'm not doing that. And so they put him in jail.
Wow. Yeah, so that's amazing. And so for the viewers out there, Moshe Feiglin, he was the deputy speaker of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, when I went over there. And if you have not seen the interview we did with him was so fascinating and so different than what you normally hear, you know, about all this Israel and Arab stuff. It was so interesting. We actually just ran it word for word, and we very, very rarely do that. But if you haven't seen that, go check that out. You can go to your favorite search engine, type in thenewamerican.com, Moshe Feiglin interview, and I mean, just talked about all kinds of different issues, but it was really a fresh perspective, I think. Bob, you have a lot of thoughts about Israel. I know you're a member of the John Birch Society. You are not a big fan of the establishment or the globalist agenda, and yet you have some really interesting views about how Israel fits into all this. Would you tell us a little bit about, what do you think about the Israeli government? What do you think about the Israeli nation? How does it all fit into the broader question? Are the Israelis in the same boat as the Americans in terms of, having this kind of deep state establishment running things behind the scenes? And, are the solutions there similar to here? And what are the solutions?
Well, there's no question in my mind that all the governments of the world are basically controlled by the same globalists. And unfortunately, Israel, if you read the Torah, is supposed to be a Jewish nation apart and separate from other nations, and to be a light unto the nations. The purpose of the Jewish people, as designed by God, as exemplified in the Torah, is that they would bring God's word to the rest of the world, which was totally pagan. When Abraham smashed his parents' idols, that was the first burgeoning of monotheism, that one God. But unfortunately, instead of being a light unto the nations, there are many Jews that are ginos, Jews in name only, whose only real connection to Judaism is a bagel and cream cheese and lox. And these are the people running Israel. And so any Jew that stands strong on the land, like Moshe Feiglin did, and will not compromise and will not give away 1 inch of God's land, is viewed as a pariah. Don't forget Trump just promoted a Palestinian state, which of course I call a Fakistinian state, or a leprechaunistian state. This doesn't exist. But Trump just promoted that. And of course, he wasn't doing anything different than what Bibi Netanyahu has been doing all his life. Bibi has given speeches in front of the U.S. Congress pushing this so-called 2-state solution, which I call the rest in peace solution. And then Trump, as part of his plan, proposed building a corridor that would connect Hamas in the north, in Gaza, with the PLO in the southern part, in Judea and Samaria. And so Trump, in his plan, had to give the Jews a tiny sliver, like where I have a house, in Judea and Samaria, because it's already 90% Jewish. So what is he going to do? Kick 400,000 Jews out of their homes? That would not look very good on television. So what he did was he gave them what already is a fact on the ground. It is a fait accompli. It's de facto. But the rest of the Holy Land he gives to the Arabs. And the Jews are all jumping up and, oh, he's the greatest. The Jews are they call it a galut mentality. A lot of Jews want to be loved by the Gentiles. I don't want to be loved by anybody. I'm not here to be loved. I'm here to tell the truth. And I don't care what people think. Because if people love you these days, God will hate you. And if God loves you these days, people will hate you. And instead of doing what's right and standing up for what's right, what do you think I would say if, God willing, I was ever prime minister of Israel, which I wouldn't bet on? If Trump told me I should give away the Holy Land to the Arabs, you think I might have a few words for him? Maybe 2 words that are not happy birthday.
Yeah. Knowing you, I bet you would have some very colorful remarks, Bob. Bob, you are going to be launching a new podcast soon, if I understand. In the last couple of minutes we have left here, what can you tell us about this podcast? Where can people hear more from you? And how long do we have to wait until it's out?
Well, right now, because I'm not even able to use a cell phone, that's how technologically backward I am. In fact, I'm backward in every area. I'm like a prehistoric man. I actually think men were created to marry women. I know I'm strange.
Oh my God, that's heresy nowadays.
So I have these technology people that are working on it right now. And as soon as they figure out how to get a dinosaur like me in gear, I had to have your colleague Brennan help me just to get on Skype. That's how bad I am. So this technology stuff is not really my bag. My bag is learning and reading. I read 60 hours a week for the last 20 years. And that is why I believe God put me here. We all have our own role. My job is to get information and to give it out whether you like it or not.
Well, we really appreciate you spending some time with us, Bob. Thank you for sharing your insight with us, and we hope to have you back sometime soon. And I'm really looking forward to your podcast. So thank you for what you do, Bob. Keep up the great work. Somebody needs to speak the truth, even if people don't want to hear it. And so, thank you. God bless you, folks. That was Bob Unger. He is an attorney up in New York. Really an incredible guy. I've known him for years. We have some of the most fascinating conversations. And so, thank you very much for watching, everybody. Make sure you share, subscribe, all that stuff. As I mentioned during the program, YouTube is doing everything possible to shut us down. They say they're going to get any content that doesn't agree with the World Health Organization's propaganda. They're going to remove that as a violation of their terms of service. They're laughing at the people who make the content. They're shadow banning us. So we really depend on you guys to get the information out, to get the truth out. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Go to thenewamerican.com to bypass all the social media companies. Thank you guys so much for watching, and God bless you all.